McDonald. Senator Lundy.
Thank you, Mr President. I still get goosebumps hearing that iconic song from the 1972 election, It's Time. For me, it captured so much of the optimism that was embodied in the vision and policies of the Whitlam-led Federal Australian Labor Party. Now, I don't actually remember it when it happened. It was in the putting together or playing a small role in supporting the 20th commemoration of the dismissal 20 years after, 1975, so 1995, that I sought the footage and we were given permission to play it at that commemorative function. But the emotions, my observation is that the emotions felt at that time by both rusted-on and converts to the Labor cause alike were obviously a high point in Australian political idealism. They are emotions that people hunger for still, as they look to the Labor Party to present this high vision for Australia. The expansive policies and programs of the Whitlam government have changed Australia for the better, and they started many initiatives which were subsequently brought to fruition by subsequent governments, and worked on many campaigns and ideas that may not have come to fruition at all, but remain part of that large body of ideas that are pursued by the Labor Party and by people who have at their heart a progressive nature. I want to reflect on just a few of these today, but before I do, it's an interesting and very long list of achievements, and I put my own together listening and reading the media commentary, listening to colleagues here today, and just off the top of my head, everything from the pulling together of the Order of Australia in recognition of Australians having our own order of system of recognition, I think is an enormous achievement. The Republic, environment conservation, heritage preservation, equal pay, freedom from discrimination, the arts, industry, regional development, being a confident global citizen, land rights, universal healthcare, free education, and one I do want to focus on, multicultural Australia. The Minister in the Whitlam government from 1972 to 1974 for immigration was the person, Al Grasby, who launched Australia's policy on multiculturalism in 1973, earning him the tag Father of Multiculturalism. The first official reference to multiculturalism is in a 1973 speech entitled A Multicultural Society for the Future. During this time, the Whitlam government introduced a variety of wide-ranging reforms in citizenship, immigration, services for people from non-English speaking backgrounds and Indigenous affairs. This included introducing community radio in a range of languages for the first time. They, of course, as we've heard today already, banned racially selected sporting teams from playing in Australia and applied new non-discriminatory procedures for the selection of migrants and the issue of tourist visas. One of the specific initiatives that I want to reflect on, and this is summarised by the Whitlam Institute in this way, they reflect on many aspects of the wider Australia policy had already been removed up to that point, but discriminatory measures in immigration still remained, and certain privileges and advantages were still given to white or British migrants and denied to others. It was the Whitlam government that acted to remove this discrimination. The Whitlam Institute goes on to reflect that before the election of the Whitlam government, the Assistant Passage Migration Scheme, which provided financial assistance to new migrants, discriminated against immigrants on the basis of their ethnicity. The Whitlam government was the government to extend the scheme to include immigrants of any ethnicity. Further, eligibility for citizenship was made more equitable. Before the Australian Citizenship Act of 1973, migrants from non-Commonwealth nations had to reside in Australia for 5 years before they were eligible for citizenship, whereas Commonwealth migrants could qualify after 1 year of residing in Australia. The Whitlam government's legislation meant that all immigrants, regardless of their origin, were eligible after 3 years' residence in Australia. And during this time as well, it was reflected on that the absence of images of non-Anglo-Australian cultural representation in popular culture, especially in the media, was attracting a lot of comment. And the question asked, how often do our television screens reflect anything like the variety of migrant groups encountered in a real-life stroll through our city streets and suburbs? Mr. President, it wasn't a stretch that these observations formed part of the motivation for the subsequent governments, the Fraser government's 1978 Galbally report. As an important aside, the Galbally report recommended additional program structure around Australia's multicultural society and articulated principles for access and equity for all Australians. These principles remain alive and well today. The Galbally report also provided the framework for the establishment of Australia's Special Broadcasting Service, the SBS. Following the passage of the Racial Discrimination Act, the former minister, or the minister at the time, Mr Grasby, was appointed the Commissioner for Community Relations. With 2 staff, he set about putting it into action. Gough was at the launch, of course, and he said at the time, and I quote, "The Racial Discrimination Act wrote it firmly into the legislation that Australia is in reality a multicultural nation in which the linguistic and cultural heritage of the Aboriginal people and of peoples from all parts of the world can find an honoured place." For the first time, Australia affirmed its opposition to all forms of racial discrimination. So today I'd like to pay my respects and acknowledge the leadership provided by Gough Whitlam and the Whitlam government in shaping a genuinely multicultural nation. We were by definition anyway, but it had yet to be reflected in formal policy and programs. It was the Whitlam government that showed us and called it up for what it was. We were already a diverse nation, with our diversity stemming well before the great wave of post-Second World War migration. Combined with the profound steps taken by the Whitlam government in progressing the rights of Aboriginal Australians, human rights, and this theme of equity regardless of one's race or ethnicity, became for the Australian Labor Party one of our themes, one of our principles, and I'm proud to say it remains so to this day. And I'm sure the ACT branch members that I work with so often, and they remind me constantly, that this is one of the great principles of Labor that is all of our responsibility to uphold. As it happens, Gough was at one time a member of the ACT-ALP's Canberra South sub-branch, and I'm sure they will take the time to reflect on that auspicious membership in their monthly meeting to come. Mr President, today we are commemorating Edward Gough Whitlam, Companion of the Order of Australia, Queen's Counsel. But to most Australians, he was a genuine hero. He changed their world in many ways, and he gave us a sense of pride and national identity. For me personally, the legacy that this man has left me as a Labor activist and representative in this place is Australia's place in the world, that we are a nation that can stand on our own 2 feet, proudly, confidently, and with a strong vision for the future. He was able to stand up and bring new conversations into the Parliament, new issues that were affecting people, born out of what his experience was talking to people and taking the time to do so. These are all wonderful lessons for us still. And to uphold the legacy that Gough Whitlam gave us, it is incumbent upon us all to still take these lessons and apply them in a very genuine way, as I try to. But most of all, it was his optimism and outward focus for Australia to take its place in the world. And for this, I'm truly grateful. I'd like to extend my condolences to the Whitlam family. I'd also like to extend those to Senator Faulkner and the pain he is obviously feeling now, and to each and every one of my colleagues. In reflecting on Gough Whitlam and his life and his contribution, I know has had an extraordinarily, well, again, I should just speak for myself, it's had an uplifting effect. It's helped remind me of the Labor legacy and why I do the work I do. Thank you, Gough.
Thank you, Senator.